Order, order. We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Wales, Ben Lake.
Question 1, sir.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And if I may, could I first thank workers and emergency responders across Wales for all their work over the weekend to protect people and property during Storm Dara. I'm sure the whole House will join me in sending condolences to the families of the 2 people who lost their lives. Mr. Speaker, the autumn budget delivered for Wales for the first time in a generation, and the Welsh Government has received the largest settlement in real terms since devolution at £21 billion. This includes an additional £1.7 billion through the Barnett formula, providing a spending boost to public services like the NHS.
Ben Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to associate myself with the words there of the Secretary of State for all those impacted and by the Storm Dara and those working hard to restore power. The Welsh Government's draft budget yesterday noted that the UK Government will be providing additional support to mitigate the cost for public organisations of the additional employers' national insurance contributions. However, the detail remains to be published. Given that many of these organisations will soon be setting their own budgets, could the Secretary of State urge the Treasury to bring forward urgent clarity so that local authorities and public organisations in Wales can have the clarity they need to set their budgets?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The Welsh Government will receive additional funds to help with the cost of national insurance contributions on top of that record budget settlement of £21 billion, the biggest since the dawn of devolution. However, that critical funding and all the investment announced in the budget yesterday by the Welsh Government will only get to where it's needed if his party colleagues in the Senedd vote for the budget.
Caroline Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The budget commitment of £80 million for the Charter Transition Board was indeed welcome. But Thrive, the domestic abuse organisation in Neath and Port Talbot, are concerned that since the Charter announcement, there's both a rise in reported incidents of domestic violence and a demand for prevention services by perpetrators. Can the Secretary of State provide assurances that the Transition Board will look at this as a priority funded project?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to my honourable friend for all her work to tackle domestic abuse. She is such an effective advocate for the people she campaigns for. And I also want to thank Thrive for all the work they do in Neath and Port Talbot. I want to assure my honourable friend that one of the Transition Board's aims is to support the well-being of workers and their families in our steel communities, and we are studying the data closely to target future releases of funding in the most effective way possible.
Sure, Secretary of State, Minister Davis.
Mr. Speaker, firstly, my sympathies with all residents and businesses after this weekend's storm impact. And may I also thank Andrew R.T. Davis for his leadership of our party in the Senedd and wish Darren Miller well. Mr. Speaker, the UK Labour Chancellor has plummeted business confidence through the floor with her budget actions on the family farm tax, with their new jobs tax, and the hospitality sector whacked by a £1 billion bill, according to UK Hospitality. Will the Secretary of State confirm there is no benefit for Wales, despite her figures? It is simply a money merry-go-round, taking from Welsh businesses, destroying jobs in the meantime, squashing growth, meaning poorer public services as the front line remains squeezed.
Secretary of State.
I appreciate that the honourable lady representing a constituency on the south coast of England may not be familiar with the landscape of businesses in Wales. In Wales, 94.6% of small and medium enterprises are micro businesses and 3.8% are small businesses. We protected the smallest businesses and more than doubled the employment allowance to £10,500 in the budget, meaning that over half of small and micro businesses will pay less or no national insurance contributions at all.
Ms. Savile-Roberts.
The Secretary of State celebrates funding for Wales, yet she fails to mention that outside of the NHS, Welsh Government's budget is 10% lower in real terms compared to, wait for it, 2010. This falls far short of fixing the foundations of collapsing public services. Does she believe, therefore, that a budget which leaves Wales with less compared to 14 years ago is really a budget worth celebrating?
Secretary of State.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her question. I think someone probably should get her a calculator, because the Plaid Cymru asks for the budget would create at least £5 billion a year in unfunded bills for the taxpayer. HS2, winter fuel allowance, two-child benefit cap. Those plans would mean significant spending cuts in Wales, and we're not prepared to subject the people of Wales to that. If she wants further investment in Wales, her party needs to vote for the Welsh Government budget in the Senedd.
Liz Savile-Roberts.
Glad that the Secretary of State mentioned HS2, because her government's budget confirms that it will run to Euston, and this stretch alone will cost £9.4 billion. HS2 construction work also means that passengers from Wales will face disruption, as trains will be diverted away from Paddington for 7 years. She previously said that HS2 no longer exists. Does she stand by this statement, given that Welsh passengers are going to be bearing the huge costs of this project?
Secretary of State.
The Right Honourable Lady knows that my reference to HS2 was in relation to the second phase of HS2, which the Conservative government cancelled. And she knows, because I've said it before and I'll say it again, that I remain very angry about the previous government's broken promises on rail and on HS2. I am working in partnership with Welsh Government to develop a long-term and sustainably funded package of much-needed rail infrastructure improvements, and I met with GWR with my honourable friend just last week to deal with mitigations in relation to Old Oak Common.
Select Committee Ruth Jones.
Question 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is supporting clean energy projects in Wales. 7 tidal, solar and onshore projects were successful in the recent Contracts for Difference scheme, and we have given the Celtic and Anglesey free ports the green light, which will enable green industries to grow, creating new jobs. And I'm delighted that 13 projects have been successful in the first round of the Crown Estate's £50 million Supply Chain Accelerator Fund, which will support the delivery of floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Under-Secretary of State was with me recently in Llandudno, where we met at a round table with the main stakeholders regarding the floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea. So this project is ready to go and bring massive benefits in terms of cheaper, secure energy for everybody across the UK. So what is the Secretary of State and the Welsh Office doing to ensure that the contracts are signed and delivered and sealed as quickly as possible? We want these benefits to come via Wales, not via other regions or countries.
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. We know that floating offshore wind is going to be critical in delivering our clean energy mission, and Wales has a huge part to play in this. So the UK Government, jointly with Welsh Government, recognises those opportunities, what they present for Wales, and we're determined to take full advantage of them. My colleagues in DESNES are working as closely as possible to move the process forward as quickly as possible, noting the need for certainty and a tight timetable so that we can get on with it.
Ynys Medi.
Steel is a key component in developing clean energy projects. In response to my written question, the government confirmed it has estimated the cost of nationalising British steel to safeguard the plant's future. Can the Secretary of State explain why did it do so for British steel but dismissed nationalisation in the case of Port Talbot?
Secretary of State.
The government has no plans to nationalise British steel.
Rhys Stafford.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Welsh Government has introduced a bill in the Senedd which will give local authorities in Wales the choice to introduce a levy on overnight stays in visitor accommodation. And it will be for individual councils to decide whether they will introduce a small charge paid by people staying overnight in commercially let accommodation in Wales to help support a thriving tourism industry.
Gregory Stafford.
There won't be one.
I thank the Secretary of State for that response, but has she done an assessment of the regional impact on this levy? Whilst perhaps across the whole of Wales the impact can be levelled out and absorbed, clearly some communities are going to be hit harder than others. How are they going to be compensated for this impact?
More than 40 countries and holiday destinations around the world have introduced a form of visitor levy, including Greece, Amsterdam, Barcelona and California, and many of us have paid the levy while abroad without noticing. The money will help support the long-term thriving tourism industry in Wales. I'm confident that the Welsh Government will work with businesses and tourists alike to get this right.
Gordon Puffin.
Mr. Speaker, does the Secretary of State agree with me that the successful introduction of similar schemes like this in places like Manchester and indeed in successful tourist destinations around the world shows that the party opposite should stop fear-mongering and support something that could really boost Welsh tourism?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. As I say, it's already the norm in more than 40 countries and holiday destinations around the world. Manchester shows it can work. Why can't Wales?
So, Secretary of State Mims Davies.
Tourism is vital to the Welsh economy. However, Labour's new tourism tax has merely just created attraction closures and strikes, from the zoo in Ynysmôn to the Cliff Railway in Aberystwyth. Mr. Speaker, the Welsh Government proposal will put more jobs in jeopardy, hotel rooms left empty, and will simply send Welsh families across the border onto flights for their trips, treats and holidays. Does the Secretary of State really agree with her colleagues in Cardiff Bay that the potential price of 700 tourism jobs and the loss of tourism to Wales, together with £40 million of revenue, is a price worth paying?
Secretary of State.
I'm afraid I don't recognise any of those figures from the right honourable lady. As I say, in Manchester, a similar scheme has been introduced, been highly successful, and has raised £2.8 million in just 1 year. She should be more ambitious for Wales.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 4 and 5 together. Both the UK and Welsh Governments are seized of the need to drive down waiting lists. The spending review provided the Welsh Government with an additional £1.7 billion for next year to invest in public services like the NHS. The Welsh Government recently announced an additional £50 million in this year to reduce the longest waiting times by increasing capacity for more people to be seen and treated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the disastrous record that the Labour Party has in healthcare in Wales over the last 25 years, it is cold comfort to residents in South West Hertfordshire if that is the template they intend to use across the whole of the United Kingdom. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the key to reducing wait lists in Wales and South West Hertfordshire is investing in our healthcare infrastructure, particularly new hospitals?
Secretary of State.
If I was him, I'd be a bit embarrassed about raising new hospitals after his government's record. The Welsh Government have just had a £21 billion record settlement, £1.7 billion of Barnett consequentials, and the Welsh Government budget yesterday, £610 million for the NHS and social care to bring down waiting lists and increase capacity. The Welsh Government is focusing on the priorities of the Welsh public.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Labour Party have been in charge in Wales for 25 years. The percentage of patients in Wales waiting more than a year for treatment is 22.5%, compared to 4% in England.
Exactly.
So the question is, why in 25 years in charge have you not reformed the NHS in Wales and brought down waiting lists?
I'm not sure Mr. Speaker is in charge of reforming NHS in Wales, but I would say to the honourable gentleman that over the previous Conservative government, waiting lists increased by a larger percentage in England than they did in Wales.
Anna Dixon.
Mr. Speaker, and as the Minister has just said, it was under the last Prime Minister that waiting lists increased faster in England than in Wales. So does the Minister agree and the Secretary of State agree with me that recent budget announcements by both the UK and Welsh Government demonstrate that both governments understand the importance of fixing our NHS and delivering for the people of the whole United Kingdom?
I couldn't agree more with my honourable friend. As I say, a record settlement for Welsh Government. Yesterday, £610 million announced by the Welsh Government to bring down waiting lists and increase capacity in the NHS and in social care. And if the parties opposite want more money and more investment in the NHS, then they need to tell their colleagues in the Senate to vote for the budget.
Torsten Bell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Welsh Budget yesterday announced significant extra funding for the NHS in Wales, and what I'm surprised about is why are the parties opposite voting against it?
Secretary of State.
I think their stance on the Welsh Government budget says it all. They're more bothered about scoring cheap political points than they are delivering services and investment for Wales.
Secretary of State Mint Davis.
The NHS in Wales is broken. Under Labour, waits continue and no family, it seems, doesn't have somebody waiting in an ever-growing queue, the highest on record. 1 in 4 of the Welsh population are on a waiting list. In September, Mr. Speaker, that was 801,000 people who are in need of treatment. If you have lost your winter fuel allowance, along with any hope of seeing a GP, a consultant, getting social care, does the Secretary of State, what does the Secretary of State really have to say and do to reassure older people that the Labour government here and in the Senate really have the ability to tackle this disgrace of a backlog?
Secretary of State.
I would say to the Honourable Lady that the Welsh Government and the UK Government are looking after pensioners in Wales. Our decision about winter fuel payments was a tough decision, but the right decision, given the economic inheritance from her party. We are focused on delivering funding and support to the people who need it most. There's already been a 152% increase in pension credit claims since July's announcement. And those people who get the winter fuel payment will get an extra £1,900 a year on average in pension credit.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson David Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in rural Powys are suffering as a consequence of delays to ambulances turning up, or in some cases, those ambulances not turning up at all. One example, recently, the family of a stroke victim in my constituency had to drive their paralysed and vomiting mother in a car to a hospital in Hereford after being told there would be a 4 to 7 hour wait for an ambulance. And that was after they'd already been waiting 2 hours for an ambulance to arrive. Shockingly, that's not an isolated case and is an experience that many people across rural Wales can relate to. Can the Secretary of State tell me what action she's taking to reassure my constituents that an ambulance will turn up in their hour of need?
Secretary of State.
Can I say to the Honourable Gentleman, I'm very sorry to hear about the experience of his constituent. Yesterday, the Welsh Government announced £610 million additional funding for the Welsh NHS and for social care. I hope his colleague in the Senedd will vote for the Welsh Government budget so that we can see that investment go into the NHS to deliver the improvements in waiting times that we all want to see.
Matt Bishop.
Question 6, Mr. Speaker.
Who's doing it? Minister.
Sorry, question 6? Yes, question 6, okay. Right, we're working in close partnership with the Welsh Government to grow our economy and unleash Wales's potential. This has already delivered tangible results, including securing more than £1 billion investment and hundreds of jobs for North Wales, a better deal for steelworkers at Port Talbot, and a record budget settlement for the Welsh Government to spend on public services, including, unlike the previous government, providing funding to keep coal tips safe.
Matt Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was pleased to see the Secretary of State announce the Welsh Economic Growth Advisory Group. Can she explain how the resetting of relationships between the Welsh and UK Government is strengthening Wales's position in the UK industrial strategy, therefore also improving access to vital services and relationships over the border in the Forest of Dean?
Well, indeed, Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State was very pleased to chair the first meeting of the advisory group last week. The group will work with us to inform the UK Government's industrial strategy to ensure that we build on Wales's proud industrial heritage and develop the jobs and industries of the future. This is the first time that representatives from both governments, business, education, industry groups and unions have come together to shape cross-government UK policy, proving the difference that two governments working together for Wales can make.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no better way of strengthening the union than improving the health care of people in Wales, and somehow the party opposite in the general election managed to mislead the public in England thinking they could bring the change to the health service. In truth, we need Welsh people to have a much improved health service as the people in England have had under Conservative control. What? Only the party opposite could suggest that longer waiting lists in Wales, worse outcomes in Wales, were somehow something to crow about. They aren't. What is going to be done about it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what do you make of that? With the additional funding we've provided for Welsh Government, I can assure you that there will be proper investment in the Welsh Health Service in Wales, which has not happened for 14 years under the Tories.
Ranger.
Question 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have regular discussions with my Cabinet and Welsh Government colleagues on economic growth. I recently had the pleasure of visiting Airbus in Broughton alongside the Prime Minister and addressed the CBI Wales members alongside the First Minister. Since coming into government, we've worked to drive over £1 billion in private investment from Erin Holding and Kellogg's into North Wales, creating and sustaining over 400 jobs.
Andrew Ranger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for that answer. Cross-border cooperation and investment between North Wales and the Mersey-Dee region of North West England is essential to maximising growth on both sides of the border. Key to achieving this will be improved railway connectivity. Will the Secretary of State meet with me and the cross-party, cross-nation Growth Track 360 group to explore how we can make this happen and help the economies on both sides of the border prosper?
Secretary of State.
I know the key role that good cross-border transport plays in strengthening economic and social ties across North Wales and the North West of England. I was pleased to join the Welsh Government Transport Cabinet Secretary at Flint and Chester stations recently to announce an increase of rail capacity by 40%, with 50% more timetabled services on the North Wales main line. And I would be delighted to meet with my honourable friend with Mersey-Dee and Growth Track 360.
Colin Lockhart.
Speaker, today outside this place, thousands of farmers have descended in a further bid to have this government listen and realise the consequences of their actions. Is it not time to do the right thing by those who feed our nation and stop the family farm tax grab that will see our farms decimated and our food security put in jeopardy? This certainly won't help economic growth.
I thank the honourable lady for her question. The UK budget delivered £5 billion over the next 2 years into farming, and I was pleased that this government was able to protect current Welsh farm budgets for the next financial year. And yesterday's Welsh budget allocation confirmed protection of the basic payment scheme funding for the next year, together with additional revenue and capital funding to help the sector transition to the new sustainable farming scheme. And this has been welcomed by farming unions across Wales.
Richard Holden.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
The Government is absolutely committed to working collaboratively with the Welsh Government to improve transport connectivity within Wales and with the rest of the UK. We are already making progress. Network Rail and Transport for Wales announced a joint programme which, as my right honourable friend has said, will see 50% more timetable services on the North Wales main line. And I was delighted to see the tri-mode trains introduced into services in the South Wales Metro last month.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Lower Thames crossing is a vital link between our channel ports and the port of Holyhead. Will the Minister lobby the Welsh Government? I know that they're Labour against new road building in Wales, but it's a vital piece of transport infrastructure for our whole country to connect our channel ports all the way through to that North Wales corridor. So will the Minister give the commitment to actually argue for it in Wales and for an entire United Kingdom?
Well, I would just remind the honourable member that Holyhead has, of course, been very recently given the Freeport tax status, and I can assure him that the Welsh Government has not ruled out a third Menai crossing.
Catherine Fuchs.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister agree that casualties falling by a quarter on 20 and 30 miles an hour roads last year in terms of our transport policy in Wales will be of great comfort to schools like Osbaston in my constituency, but also parents like Rhiannon in Flintshire, who praise the scheme for helping to save her son's life after he was hit by a car?
Well, indeed, Mr Speaker, the Welsh Government has been very clear that the primary objective of the 20-mile-an-hour policy was to save lives and reduce casualties, and recent collisions data provides an encouraging sign that this policy is moving in the right direction.
Adam Jogi.
Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, the Government holds regular discussions with the Welsh Government on tackling violence against women and girls to help drive forward the Government's ambition to halve violence against women and girls in a decade. Most recently, on the 13th of November, the Minister for Safeguarding met with the Welsh Minister for Social Care and Welsh Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, and they discussed measures to tackle violence against women and girls in detail.
Adam Jogi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The safety of women and girls is important in Newcastle and Lyme as it is up and down our United Kingdom. Now, the Welsh Government has had a violence against women strategy since 2022. Sadly, the previous government didn't have one for my constituents in England. So can the Minister set out what lessons this new government can learn from the Welsh Labour government, keeping our women and girls safe?
Well, indeed, as my honourable friend says, the Welsh Government's violence against women and girls strategy has been pioneering delivery on this important issue for 2 years now. The UK Government's aim of halving violence against women and girls in a decade is ambitious, and learning lessons from the Welsh Government really will help. South Wales Police have introduced new measures as part of their long-standing commitment to tackling violence against women and girls, including the Cardiff Safety Buses, which have received national recognition for their work, safeguarding more than 3,000 vulnerable people on the streets of Cardiff since September 2021.
Said you always deliberately save the last question before PM2.
It's up to you, Mr Speaker. You always call me a very kind. Thank you very much. Obviously, when it comes to tackling violence against women and girls, it can all be done regionally. But is it not time, Mr Speaker, that this is done on a national level, where England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland work together to deal with the issue of violence against women and girls? Thanks so much.
Thank you. Minister.
Well, absolutely, Mr Speaker. That's why it is absolutely central to our manifesto, with commitments that will take in the whole of the UK, particularly commitments from the Home Office and policing, and in legislation that we intend to bring forward.
We now start with questions to Prime Minister.